Have you ever wondered how much of your life is truly yours? Not just the hours you spend working or the money sitting in your account, but the hidden corners of your choices, your habits, even the way you dream. Here's the unsettling truth. Money doesn't just live in your wallet. It quietly scripts your life behind the curtain. It tells you what you can desire, where you can stand, who you can become. And the strange part? Most of the time, you don't even notice it happening. Money controls you, even when you think you're the one in control. Take a moment to reflect on that. When we think of money controlling us, we usually imagine something obvious, like working long hours at a job or paying bills that drain our paycheck. But the real influence is far deeper and more invisible. Think of money as gravity. You can't see it directly, but it bends the path of everything around you. Your choices in the supermarket, the clothes you wear, the city you live in, these seem like personal decisions. But they're already shaped by invisible price tags, by economic forces deciding what is available to you in the first place. History gives us countless reminders. The rise and fall of empires often hinged not on armies, but on gold, trade routes, and debts. Entire civilizations dreamed, fought, and collapsed under the weight of money's hidden hand. And today, though we rarely admit it, the same invisible strings guide us. The mind-bending part is this. If money can shape your desires, your time, your identity, even your silence, then how much of you is truly your own? Is freedom just another word in the marketplace? Are your dreams actually yours? Or are they just investments written by someone else's balance sheet? This is why the idea matters. Because once you see how money shapes you, you can't unsee it. And even if you can't escape it, you can begin to recognize the game being played all around you. Take a slow breath. Let that thought settle. Now, let's begin uncovering the first way money controls you. It starts with something you feel every day, something you think belongs to you, but often doesn't. The illusion of choice. We often pride ourselves on the ability to choose. It feels like the very definition of freedom, the simple, everyday act of picking one thing over another. You walk into a grocery store, and before you stretch endless aisles of possibility. Cereals in every color, fruits arranged like jewels, bottles glimmering with promise. You stand there, believing that you are exercising free will, comparing prices, flavors, or brands, and in that moment, it feels as if the decision is yours alone. But what if this freedom is only a carefully staged performance? What if the choices you see are not true choices at all, but illusions narrowed long before you ever entered the store? This is the quiet trick of money. It gives you the sensation of freedom while quietly fencing off the boundaries of your world. The shelf itself, the brands allowed to exist, the very idea of what counts as food or entertainment or clothing, all of these have already been filtered, sculpted, and polished by money's invisible hand. What you don't see, what you don't get to choose, has been quietly erased because it was never profitable. Pause and consider that. Take a slow breath. Let it sink in. Your free will bends not under the weight of kings or priests, not under the lash of authority, but under the quiet, ordinary arithmetic of profit and loss. To understand this illusion, think about something as simple as breakfast cereal. When you walk down the aisle, the boxes shimmer in bright colors, promising happiness in every bite. It feels like variety, abundance, even luxury. But step back for a moment. Every single one of those brands, with their cartoon mascots and glittering promises, often belongs to the same handful of companies. They compete not to give you freedom, but to capture your attention within a narrow spectrum of what is profitable for them to sell. You are not really choosing between 100 options. You are choosing between a few variations of the same underlying recipe, packaged differently for the illusion of choice. This is not confined to supermarkets. Think of the way digital streaming works. You log into a platform, scroll through endless movies, documentaries, shows. It feels infinite, but it isn't. Behind the glowing thumbnails lies a set of corporate negotiations, licensing agreements, and profit calculations. The films you see available are not simply all that exists. They are what companies want you to see, what they believe is profitable to show, what fits neatly into their business model. You don't see the films that couldn't secure rights, the art deemed too risky, the stories that weren't made because investors didn't believe they would sell. You only see what money allows you to see. In this way, money controls you through absence. What's missing is never obvious. You don't feel the loss of a product that never reached the shelves. You don't mourn the movie that was never greenlit, the book that no publisher dared to touch, the medicine that could have been developed, but wasn't because the market wasn't large enough. You simply navigate the curated world in front of you and assume you are free. This is the essence of the illusion. You can only choose from within the cage of what money permits. Pause here and reflect on this. Take a breath. Imagine the thousands of unseen doors that were closed before you ever arrived. Philosophers have long asked whether human beings truly have free will, or whether our choices are always shaped by forces beyond us. Traditionally, these debates focus on fate, biology, or divine power. But in the modern world, money plays the role of destiny. It is not some ancient god, yet it operates with godlike reach. It shapes what is possible, what is desirable, and even what enters your imagination as a choice in the first place. Take the example of medicine. The drugs available to you today are not only the result of scientific progress, they are also the outcome of financial decisions, where companies choose to invest, which diseases are profitable to cure, and which are not. Rare illnesses, the ones that affect only a handful of people, often receive little funding. Why? Because the cost of development outweighs the potential revenue. Imagine the patients waiting in hospital beds, their hope quietly eclipsed, not because the science is impossible, but because the economics are unfavorable. Their freedom to choose treatment is erased before it ever reached their hands. The illusion of choice is also cultural. Walk through a shopping mall, and you'll notice how styles seem to shift seasonally. One year, wide-legged pants return. The next, everything becomes tight and minimal. These trends feel spontaneous, like cultural waves that rise naturally. But behind them is the machinery of fashion houses, advertising campaigns, and manufacturing costs. The palette of your clothing is not just taste, it is the shadow of supply chains, cost calculations, and marketing departments. You are not choosing style. Style is choosing you through the filter of profit. Now, pause again. Take a moment. Let your mind wander to all the places in your own life where you thought you were choosing freely, only to realize that the boundaries were already drawn. Even in matters as intimate as relationships, money leaves its trace. Dating apps present you with an endless gallery of faces, and you might believe you are freely selecting from an ocean of possibility. But the algorithm, designed to maximize engagement and subscriptions, curates who you see and who sees you. The illusion of abundance hides the reality. Your pool of options is engineered by financial motives. You are swimming in water dyed to look deeper than it really is. Historically, societies have always had structures that limited choice. In medieval Europe, the peasant was bound to the land, unable to move freely. In ancient empires, the citizen's fate was often dictated by class or birth. We look back at these eras and imagine ourselves freer now. But are we? Today, the chains are not iron, they are invisible. They take the form of markets, contracts, and price tags. They tell us we are free, but only within the arena money has prepared for us. The contradiction is striking. We feel empowered when we choose. But what if the real freedom is not in the act of choosing, but in the ability to shape what is on the table to begin with? And in that sense, most of us are powerless. We don't decide what products exist. We don't decide which medicines are researched, which stories are told, which technologies are unleashed. We only decide within a narrow range of what others, with financial power, have decided for us. This raises a mind-bending question. If the shape of our world is decided by money, then how much of our identity is also decided by money? Do we love the things we love because they are inherently worthy, or because they were the only things allowed to reach us? Pause here again. Take a slow breath. Let the thought ripple outward. Imagine a bookstore. You walk in, and the shelves are lined with novels, histories, guides. It feels like a universe of possibility. But think of the thousands of manuscripts that never reached the shelf because publishers didn't think they would sell. Think of the voices erased by profitability, the ideas that never gained form. You are not choosing between all possible ideas. You are choosing from what money has allowed you to see. Your worldview, your imagination, even your vocabulary are sculpted by what is available. This is why the illusion of choice is so powerful. It is invisible. You never feel what was excluded. You simply live inside a curated world and call it freedom. But here is the paradox. Even within this cage, choice still feels real. Your coffee preference, your phone brand, your streaming playlist, they all feel like personal expressions. And in a sense, they are. But they are personal expressions, painted on a canvas that money already prepared. You are the artist, yes, but the palette and brushes belong to someone else. This realization can feel unsettling, even eerie, because it means that the very thing we often associate with individuality, our choices, may not be truly ours. They are echoes, reflections, rehearsed gestures, shaped by invisible structures. So ask yourself quietly, when was the last time you made a choice untouched by money? Can you even imagine such a choice? Perhaps it would be a walk in the woods where no brand, no advertisement, no profit motive can reach you. But even then, the land itself is marked by ownership, property lines, economic history. Even solitude is framed by money. The implications are profound. If choice itself is an illusion, then what is freedom? Is freedom simply the ability to select between options prepared for us? Or is true freedom something rarer, something we rarely touch a life where the options themselves are not dictated by money's invisible logic? This is the paradox at the heart of modern life. Money convinces us that abundance equals freedom. The more shelves, the more streaming titles, the more apps, the freer we feel. But abundance without true autonomy is just a larger cage. Pause, breathe deeply, and let that settle. And yet, this illusion does more than limit us. It also comforts us. To feel that we are free, even when we are not, is sometimes easier than confronting the limits. To believe in the richness of our choices allows us to live with satisfaction, to feel that life is abundant. The illusion is not just imposed, it is embraced. We like to think we are the ones steering the ship, even if the ocean has already been drawn by someone else's hand. This duality, comfort and confinement, makes the illusion of choice one of the most powerful ways money controls us. It shapes not only what we consume, but how we perceive ourselves. It allows us to feel empowered, even as we are guided. And now, with that thought resting in your mind, allow yourself a moment of stillness. Reflect gently. How much of your day today was shaped by choices that were never really choices at all? Take one more slow breath. And if choice is an illusion, then perhaps desire itself, the very spark that makes you want one thing over another, may not be yours either. Manufactured desire. Why do we want the things we want? It feels like a simple question, one with an equally simple answer. We want something because it appeals to us, because it tastes good, or looks beautiful, or solves a problem in our lives. We imagine our desires as spontaneous flames, ignited naturally from within. And yet, if you trace the origins of many of your cravings, you find that they began not in your own heart, but in someone else's boardroom. Why do you crave a certain style of shoe, when the shoes you already own still cover your feet perfectly well? Why does a specific model of phone suddenly feel outdated when it still works exactly as it did the day before the new one was released? Why does the fragrance of one perfume whisper elegance, while another, with nearly identical ingredients, feels ordinary? The unsettling truth is this: much of what we desire did not begin as need, nor even as preference. It began as a manufactured story, carefully woven by money. Pause here for a moment. Let that idea rest. Imagine your own desires as threads, some spun from your real needs, but many others sewn silently into your mind by commerce, culture, and advertising. This is the great trick of money. It doesn't only offer to satisfy our wants. It tells us what to want in the first place. Desire itself has become a marketplace product. Consider the strange story of diamonds. For most of history, diamonds were not especially rare. They were valued, yes, but they did not occupy the towering symbolic place they hold in our culture today. In fact, in the late 19th century, the diamond market was saturated. Mines in South Africa were producing them in quantities that made them relatively common. And so the companies that controlled the mines faced a problem. How do you turn a stone into something people feel they must have? The answer was not geology, it was psychology. Through one of the most famous advertising campaigns in history, the slogan, "A diamond is forever," was created. Ads showed lovers, engagements, romance tied inexorably to the diamond ring. The campaign didn't just sell a product. It sold the very idea that true love required a diamond. That tradition, now nearly universal in some cultures, is not ancient at all. It was manufactured deliberately within the last century. Today, countless couples spend fortunes not because the diamond itself has intrinsic value, but because desire was carefully planted in their minds. This is how money works in the realm of desire. It scripts your imagination. It tells you what symbols to chase, what status to display, what objects to attach to your identity. Pause again and let that truth linger. From the clothes we wear to the food we eat, the desires we believe are ours are often echoes of signals designed for us. Advertising works not by giving us information, but by reshaping our very sense of self. A soda company doesn't sell you sugar water. It sells you youth, energy, belonging. A car commercial doesn't sell you four wheels. It sells you power, adventure, freedom. And so, you don't just buy the object, you buy the story. And that story rearranges your inner world until desire feels natural. But what does natural desire even mean anymore? For most of human history, our wants were tethered to survival. Food, shelter, warmth, companionship. These were the basic anchors. Yet today, most of our wants are symbolic. We hunger not only for calories, but for meaning. Not only for clothing, but for image. Not only for homes, but for status. The marketplace feeds this hunger, spinning countless narratives around products until we feel incomplete without them. Think about how this plays out across your daily life. You may reach for a branded coffee in the morning, not because it tastes so different from other coffees, but because its logo, its atmosphere, and its cultural aura makes you feel a certain way. You may scroll endlessly through online shops, your mind catching on a shirt, a gadget, a decorative object you had no intention of buying 5 minutes earlier. Desire rises in you, sharp and sudden, not because the object filled a pre-existing need, but because the platform's algorithms presented it to you in a way that ignited craving. This is where we see the true depth of money's control. Desire becomes less about objects and more about identity. You don't just want shoes, you want the shoes that signify a lifestyle. You don't just want a phone, you want the phone that signals you are modern, capable, successful. You don't just want furniture, you want the furniture that whispers to visitors about your taste, your refinement, your worth. The object becomes a mirror, and the desire is not for the thing itself, but for the reflection of who you hope to be. Pause here Breathe. Reflect on this question. How many of your desires today were really yours? And how many were borrowed scripts, whispered to you by advertising, culture, and profit? Historically, this is not new. Societies have always shaped desire. In medieval Europe, the nobility as extravagant feasts weren't just about food. They were displays of wealth, designed to inspire longing in those below them. In ancient Rome, the use of rare spices or imported silks wasn't about comfort, but about signaling power. What has changed is scale. Today, the machinery of desire has been industrialized. Through global advertising, mass media, and now digital algorithms, the shaping of desire operates with breathtaking precision. Billions of people can be nudged simultaneously toward wanting the same thing. And so, desire itself becomes one of money's greatest tools. Because once you want something, money doesn't need to force you. You willingly trade your hours, your labor, your freedom in exchange for it. The most efficient way to control people is not to chain them, but to convince them to crave their own chains. Think about social media. Entire platforms thrive not by giving you what you already want, but by creating new wants in you, desires for validation, for likes, for followers, for digital attention. None of these existed a century ago, yet now they feel as natural as breathing. People chase these signals with relentless energy, sculpting their lives around the pursuit of recognition that was manufactured as a market product. Even our deepest emotions, love, belonging, security, are not safe from this manipulation. Advertisements for baby products play on parental instincts, amplifying the desire to protect and nurture, but tying that desire to a specific brand. Luxury brands create a sense of exclusivity, manufacturing the desire to be special by ensuring that most people cannot afford their products. In this way, exclusion itself becomes part of the craving. You want the thing not because of what it does, but because of who it separates you from. Pause once more. Let that sit in your mind. Breathe deeply. Reflect on how even your sense of self-worth may have been intertwined with objects, with brands, with signals carefully designed by money. The implications are profound. If our desires are scripted, then how much of our lives are truly self-directed? If what we long for is planted in us, then are we living our lives or living advertisements? And perhaps most unsettling of all, what would we even desire if we stripped away all the cultural scripts money has written into us? Could we imagine what it means to want something purely, without economic influence? Or has desire itself been colonized too deeply to separate? This realization does not have to be despairing. There is a strange comfort in recognizing the pattern. Once you see that desires are manufactured, you begin to reclaim a kind of quiet freedom. You may not escape the system entirely, but awareness softens the chains. You can look at an advertisement and whisper to yourself, "Ah, I see what you're doing. You are not giving me something I need. You are trying to manufacture a need in me." That awareness creates space, a pause, between the planted desire and your decision to pursue it. Still, even with awareness, the machinery hums on. Global industries spend billions each year, not to sell products, but to cultivate desire itself. They work to make sure that new cravings blossom faster than old ones fade, ensuring that we are never satisfied for long. The cycle is endless. Yesterday's luxury became today's standard. Yesterday's innovation becomes today's baseline. And so the treadmill of desire keeps us running, always chasing, never arriving. This is why money loves desire, because desire is infinite. Needs may be finite. You only need so much food, so much clothing, so much shelter. But desire has no ceiling. You can always want more, always want different, always want newer. By shifting the economy from meeting needs to manufacturing desires, money has guaranteed its dominion over human life. And so, tonight, as you let your mind drift in reflection, ask yourself, what do you truly desire? And what desires were written into you long before you thought to question them? Take a breath. Let it linger. And when desire is sold to us, time itself is the next thing to fall under money's command. The price of time. Time feels like the most personal of possessions. It seems to be the one thing that is purely yours. The hours that pass, the days you live, the moments you hold close. When you wake in the morning, it feels as though an entire day is laid out before you like an empty canvas, waiting for your brushstrokes. You might imagine that your time is yours to paint as you please, that no one else can truly dictate how you spend it. But step back and look closer, and you will see that money has already crept into the picture, sketching the outlines long before you pick up the brush. Time feels like your own, but money decides how you spend it. From the very beginning of adult life, the value of our hours becomes tethered to wages. A job is not just a place of work, it is the conversion of your time into currency. You sell hours, sometimes in blocks of 8, sometimes in endless stretches that blur into nights and weekends, in exchange for the promise of survival. The paycheck at the end of the week is not simply money. It is the distilled essence of your hours, pressed into paper and numbers. In this way, your time stops being an open field and becomes a commodity, measured, priced, and traded. Pause here. Let that sink in. Think of your own time as a marketplace, with each hour tagged and sold. We rarely question this arrangement because it feels natural. But it is, in truth, a peculiar invention of economics. Time did not always have a price. In earlier ages, before industrial capitalism, life was measured less by the clock and more by the rhythms of nature. Farmers rose with the sun and worked until dusk. Craftsmen shaped their days around tasks, not hours. But the rise of wage labor and the invention of the mechanical clock changed everything. Time itself became divisible, countable, monetizable. And in that transformation, freedom began to slip away. Now, consider this simple phrase: time is money. It is repeated so often that we no longer hear how strange it really is. Time and money are not the same, yet our world has merged them until they feel interchangeable. Every hour has a price, and every moment of rest is framed not as a gift, but as a cost. If you are not earning, you are losing time. Even leisure is haunted by money's shadow. A vacation is not just relaxation. It is the calculation of wages lost, savings spent, productivity postponed. This is the quiet trick money plays. It convinces us that our lives are not measured in experiences, but in economic productivity. Think of the way your day is structured. Alarms jolt you awake, not because your body is ready, but because the marketplace demands you arrive on time. Lunch breaks are rationed into fixed minutes. Weekends are brief respites carved out by labor laws. Holidays are negotiated slivers of permission, bought with time already spent in service. Even the structure of the calendar, the 5-day work week followed by 2 days of rest, exists not because it is natural, but because industrial systems found it efficient. Your time is not truly yours. It is rationed, divided, and leased back to you in fragments. Pause again. Take a deep breath. Consider how many hours of your life have already been sold. But time's commodification runs deeper still. Wages do not simply buy your presence at work, they reshape your perception of self. In a world where time is money, the value of a person is often equated to their hourly worth. 2 people may each live an hour, but if one is paid more for it, society perceives that hour as more valuable. In this way, money etches itself into existence itself. An hour of your life, which should be infinite in its significance, becomes a number on a pay stub. Your minutes, which should belong only to you, are quietly owned by someone else. This system creates a hierarchy of time. For the wealthy, time expands. They can buy leisure, buy services, buy the labor of others to free themselves from routine. For the poor, time contracts. They must work longer hours, juggling multiple jobs, selling more and more of their existence simply to survive. The paradox is cruel. Those who have the least money must surrender the most time, while those who have the most money can buy freedom from time's demands. Think of the phrase, free time. It seems innocent, but it is loaded with meaning. Free time only exists once money has been satisfied. You are free only when you are not required to sell your hours. But notice how even this freedom is shaped by money's logic. Your leisure is not truly free. It exists only as the absence of labor, a temporary suspension of your time's commodification. Pause, breathe, and reflect on this strange truth. The only time we call free is the time that has escaped money's grasp. This raises unsettling questions. If every hour has been assigned a price, what does that mean for life itself? Are we not then measuring existence in currency? If your lifetime is a fixed number of hours, and each one is sold, then are we not simply trading life away for survival, 1 hour at a time? History offers haunting reminders of this trade. In the early factories of the Industrial Revolution, children labored for pennies, their small bodies trapped in dangerous machines, their hours stolen before they could even grow into adulthood. Today, though conditions have changed, echoes remain. Workers across the globe sell 12, 14, sometimes 16 hours a day, their time consumed by money's appetite. They do not live their hours. They spend them, often for wages so small that survival still hangs in the balance. This is the paradox of modern existence. We measure wealth not in freedom, but in the ability to buy back our time. Retirement is often imagined as liberation, the moment when you no longer have to sell your hours. But by then, decades of life have already been traded. You may finally have free time, but you are no longer young enough to live it as you might have wished. Money gives you back your time only when it has already taken most of it. Pause here again. Let the weight of that truth sink in. Even our language reveals this entanglement. We say we spend time as if it were money. We say we waste time as if an unprofitable moment is a sin. We speak of investing time and saving time, phrases that transform existence into a bank account. Time becomes not a flow of life, but an economic asset to manage. In this way, money colonizes even our metaphors, until it is impossible to imagine time outside of its shadow. The implications ripple further still. If money decides how we spend time, then even our relationships are shaped by it. Parents may wish to spend more hours with their children, but work demands their presence elsewhere. Lovers may long for long afternoons together, but financial pressures compress their days. Friendships may weaken under the strain of schedules built around jobs. In this way, money not only owns our hours, it decides the depth and quality of our human connections. And then there is the cruelest irony. Technology, which promises to save time, often only tightens money's grip on it. Smartphones, productivity apps, remote work all claim to free us, but often they blur the boundaries further, pulling labor into every corner of life. The workday no longer ends at 5 when emails follow you home, when notifications buzz through dinner, when meetings colonize weekends. The hours you thought were yours dissolve into a haze of availability. Time's price follows you everywhere. Pause, breathe, reflect on how much of your life is truly your own, unmarked by money's clock. Philosophers have long warned about this. The ancient Stoics spoke of time as the one true possession, urging people to guard it fiercely. Seneca wrote that people are frugal with their money, but wasteful with their time, forgetting that time, unlike money, can never be earned back. And yet, in our world, time itself has become indistinguishable from money. To waste time feels like wasting wealth. To guard time feels like guarding currency. We have internalized the marketplace so deeply that even our most intimate possession, our fleeting moments, is priced and measured. So what, then, is left of freedom? If money buys and sells our time, then are we not, in some sense, tenants in our own lives, renting our hours back from the marketplace? This is why the price of time is such a profound form of control. It ensures that life itself is always in negotiation. Every dream, every pursuit, every pause is filtered through the question, can I afford this hour? Even joy is rationed, parceled out between shifts, saved for weekends, postponed for retirement. And yet, the awareness of this truth can also bring clarity. To see time as life, not money, is to take the first step toward reclaiming it. You may not escape the structures entirely, but you can begin to recognize when you are trading too much of your existence away. You can pause, breathe, and remind yourself, this hour is not just money. It is me. Take a moment now. Let your mind wander over the hours you've already lived. Imagine them not as coins spent, but as moments experienced. Feel the difference. One is a transaction. The other is life itself. And so we arrive at the next hidden truth. If money can put a price on time, then it can also put a price on place. If time is for sale, then even the ground beneath your feet is no longer truly yours. The geography of wealth. Money maps where you are allowed to live, work, and even dream. It draws invisible borders around your existence, and you carry those borders with you every day, whether you realize it or not. We like to believe our place in the world is a reflection of who we are, our character, our tastes, our choices, but more often than not, it is a reflection of how much money we have. Your address, the neighborhood you inhabit, the walls you wake within each morning, all whisper truths about your economic position. They are not simply places on a map, they are coordinates in the geography of wealth. Pause for a moment. Imagine the city or town you know best. Think of the streets that feel inviting, filled with cafes, leafy parks, and quiet corners. Then think of the places that feel neglected, where cracked sidewalks and faded paint speak of long disinvestment. Both places may exist only minutes apart, yet they belong to different worlds. And the line between them is rarely accidental. It is drawn again and again by money. Housing is perhaps the clearest example of this mapping. The price of a home determines not only the space you live in, but the entire ecosystem around you. Schools, safety, access to health care, even the quality of the air you breathe. These are not distributed evenly. They follow the map of money. A wealthier neighborhood draws resources like a magnet, while poorer neighborhoods are left to stretch meager budgets over crumbling infrastructures. The illusion is that these are natural differences, but in truth, they are the architecture of economics at work. Consider the way cities evolve. Urban planners and developers rarely act as neutral guides. Decisions about zoning, investment, and renewal are deeply entangled with money. Whole communities have been uprooted when their land was deemed more profitable for highways, luxury developments, or corporate campuses. Others are left behind, their streets abandoned by the flow of capital, slowly hollowing out as opportunity drifts elsewhere. The geography of wealth is not passive. It is sculpted, remade, and enforced by the machinery of profit. Pause here. Let the thought breathe. Imagine the neighborhood where you grew up. Was it shaped by family, history, or chance? Or was it, at its root, shaped by the simple arithmetic of what your family could afford? Borders, too, are economic creations. Nations are divided by lines that are often less about culture and more about resources, trade routes, or historical debts. Immigration laws, visas, and citizenship privileges determine not only where you can live, but how you are valued in different lands. A passport can be a golden key or a locked gate. And beneath it all, money decides who gets access to movement. Wealthy travelers glide easily across borders, welcomed by open airports and expedited lines. The poor are held back, scrutinized, or outright refused. Even the right to move freely through the world has been commodified. There is a haunting phrase, location is destiny. It suggests that where you are born largely determines the course of your life. And if you think about it, that is frighteningly true. A child born in a wealthy neighborhood is far more likely to inherit not only money, but opportunity. A child born in a poor, resource-starved environment may inherit struggle, no matter how much talent or ambition they possess. This inheritance is not biological, it is geographical. Money maps the future before the child even takes their first step. This geography extends beyond cities and nations. Think of rural areas. In some regions, small towns slowly wither as jobs vanish, leaving behind a patchwork of declining opportunity. Meanwhile, metropolitan centers swell with wealth, investment, and possibility. The difference between these spaces is not simply cultural, it is economic. One place is nourished by capital, the other drained of it. And so, entire communities rise and fall, not because of fate, but because money drew the map that way. Pause again. Let your breath slow. Reflect on how even your dreams are tied to place. Dreams are not abstract. They are nourished or starved by geography. A child in a city filled with universities may dream of academic life. A child in a region defined by factories may dream of steady wages. A child in a war-torn or impoverished region may dream only of survival. The geography of wealth limits not only what we can have, but what we can imagine. Even our hopes carry the fingerprints of money. Historically, the geography of wealth has always been stark. In medieval Europe, castles sat atop hills while peasants' huts clustered below, a physical embodiment of hierarchy. In colonial times, wealth extracted from conquered lands built opulent districts for the colonizers, while leaving the colonized in deprivation. Even today, skyscrapers rise as modern castles, overlooking neighborhoods where residents struggle to pay rent. Geography has always been a mirror of inequality, and money is the hand holding the mirror. And yet, this mapping is often invisible to those who benefit from it. If you live in a wealthy area, it may feel natural that your streets are safe, your parks are green, your schools are well funded. You may never see the deliberate flow of money that sustains these comforts. Similarly, if you live in poverty, the neglect can feel like an unchangeable fact of life, rather than the result of economic choices made far beyond your neighborhood. In both cases, money hides its role, making geography appear as destiny rather than design. The illusion deepens with real estate markets. Housing prices rise not only because of location, but because of speculation, investment, and the chase for profit. A neighborhood can transform overnight, not because the people changed, but because developers decided it could be worth more. The word for this is gentrification, and it reshapes lives. Longtime residents, often poorer and from marginalized communities, are forced out as rents climb. Their geography of belonging is erased, replaced with boutiques and luxury apartments. To be displaced is not only to lose a home, it is to lose a world, a community, an entire map of meaning. Pause. Take a breath. Imagine what it would feel like to be priced out of your own street, to see the geography of your life redrawn in someone else's image. But geography does not only determine where you live, it also determines where you work. Economic zones cluster industries, creating regions of wealth and regions of labor. Cities compete to attract corporations with tax breaks, reshaping landscapes around the needs of money rather than the needs of people. Even within workplaces, geography maps power. The corner office, the executive floor, the distant headquarters all symbolize not only hierarchy, but physical distance, separating those who control capital from those who sell their hours to it. Borders within borders, lines within lines. The geography of wealth is layered and subtle, but it is always present. It tells you where you belong and where you do not. It marks which spaces welcome you and which spaces exclude you. And most haunting of all, it tells you how much of your life is permitted to dream. Because geography is not only about physical location, it is about possibility. The wealthy can imagine futures filled with travel, education, and expansion. The poor must often imagine futures constrained by scarcity. Even the act of dreaming is mapped by economics. This realization unsettles the very foundation of our sense of freedom. We like to think of dreams as infinite, untethered, born purely of imagination. But in truth, they are choreographed by the places we inhabit, and those places are choreographed by money. Pause again. Let this settle like a soft weight on the surface of your thoughts. If money can draw the lines of where we live, where we work, and what we dare to imagine, then the map of our lives is not as free as we believe. It is as if we are pieces on a board, moved by forces larger than us, our paths dictated by invisible rules. The neighborhood, the city, the nation, they are not just backdrops to our existence. They are active players, bending the arc of our lives in ways we rarely recognize. And so we must ask, what happens when money decides not only where we live, but what we believe? The economics of belief. Even your worldview has a price tag. It is tempting to think of belief as something sacred, untouchable, something that belongs only to you. We imagine our worldview as a personal lens, shaped by our experiences, our thoughts, our encounters with truth. And in some ways, that is true. Yet, when you look closer, when you trace the origins of what you believe, you find that money has already passed through the roots. Belief is not grown in a vacuum. It is cultivated, curated, and often sold. Pause here for a moment. Let that thought sink in. Imagine your beliefs, the very framework through which you interpret the world, as a marketplace of ideas. Some ideas are given bright storefronts, easy access, and polished presentation. Others are hidden in alleyways, unadvertised, invisible. And the deciding factor in which beliefs you see and which you never encounter is not only truth, it is money. Think of media platforms. Newspapers, television channels, digital networks, they are rarely neutral. They are businesses, sustained by advertising, subscription models, or political sponsorships. What they show you, and what they do not show you, is shaped by financial structures. News outlets decide what stories are important, not purely based on truth, but on what will sustain their business. Sensational headlines draw clicks. Advertisers avoid controversial subjects. Certain narratives are promoted because they align with the interests of owners, investors, or sponsors. The result is that your worldview is filtered long before it reaches you. You are not simply seeing reality, you are seeing reality through an economic lens. Consider, for example, the history of textbooks. For generations, what children learned in schools was not a neutral selection of facts. It was a curated narrative, shaped by government funding, cultural expectations, and the economic pressures of publishing. Entire chapters of history have been softened, revised, or omitted because they were not profitable, not politically convenient, or not appealing to the mass market. Students learn not simply the truth, but the version of truth that money and power allowed to circulate. When you remember your own childhood lessons, consider how much of what you learned was fact and how much was filtered belief, molded by economic structures. Pause again. Take a deep breath. Reflect on how even knowledge, something we assume is universal, is in fact deeply unequal. Universities, too, reveal this. Education is often described as a pathway to truth, but in reality, it is also a business. Access to higher education depends on tuition, donations, and financial aid. Entire fields of study thrive or wither based on funding. Research projects are not always pursued because they are the most urgent or important. They are pursued because they attract grants, corporate sponsorships, or government interest. Even the production of knowledge is not free from the economics of belief. When a scientist asks a question, they must often ask not only, "Is this worth studying?" but also, "Will someone pay for the answer?" This means that even our most trusted sources of truth are shaped by markets. Knowledge that cannot find funding may remain unstudied. Ideas that cannot find an audience may remain unpublished. The world we know is not necessarily the world that is. It is the world money has decided we can afford to know. Take the example of digital platforms. Search engines, social media feeds, and streaming services use algorithms to decide what you see. These algorithms are not neutral. They are designed to maximize engagement, which in turn maximizes profit. The posts, videos, and articles that rise to the top of your feed are those that serve financial interests. If a particular narrative drives clicks, it spreads. If it offends advertisers, it vanishes. This is not a conspiracy, it is business. But the effect is profound. Your belief about the world is quietly shaped by an economic machine that rewards certain stories and suppresses others. Pause here. Imagine your beliefs not as personal truths, but as curated playlists of ideas, arranged for you by invisible hands. Even religion, something often imagined as beyond the reach of money, has long been intertwined with economics. Temples, churches, and mosques require funding. Theologies spread more successfully when backed by wealthy patrons, institutions, or empires. History is full of examples where spiritual belief was amplified or silenced depending on financial power. Pilgrimages, indulgences, offerings, these were not only acts of faith, but also acts of economic exchange. And while personal devotion may be genuine, the structures that carried those beliefs across centuries were inseparable from money. The same is true of philosophy. Which philosophers we remember, which texts survive, which ideas become canonical, are often determined by economic conditions. Works that found patrons endured. Works that did not often disappeared. Belief, even at its most profound, is sustained not only by truth, but by financial scaffolding. This realization is unsettling. Because if money filters belief, then how much of what you hold sacred, certain, or obvious is truly yours? How much of it is the residue of profit motives, institutional funding, and curated narratives? If your worldview is a market transaction, then belief itself is not a sacred space. It is a product. Take a moment here. Breathe slowly. Let this idea ripple outward. The implications are staggering. If belief is shaped by money, then disagreement among people is not only a matter of reason or values, it is also a matter of economics. Two individuals may argue fiercely about politics, morality, or science, but beneath their argument lie different financial architectures, shaping what each has seen, read, and been taught. The clash of belief is also the clash of markets, echo chambers created not only by culture, but by commerce. Consider the phrase attention economy. It describes how, in the digital age, your focus itself is the product being sold. Platforms compete not to inform you, but to hold you. In this competition, beliefs are not spread because they are true. They are spread because they are sticky, profitable, and easy to monetize. Outrage spreads faster than nuance. Simplicity spreads faster than complexity. And over time, the economics of attention becomes the economics of belief. What you hold true is not what is most carefully reasoned. It is often what has survived the marketplace of engagement. Pause again. Reflect on how many of your own beliefs came not from deep study, but from repetition, convenience, or what was placed most often in front of your eyes. The most haunting part of all this is that belief feels personal. You rarely notice the filters. You feel that your worldview is self-made, born from your own reflection and judgment. And in a way, it is. But it is also a garden planted with seeds chosen by others. Some seeds are watered, others left to wither. The landscape of your belief is not natural. It has been landscaped, pruned, and fertilized by money. This is not to say that truth does not exist, or that belief is meaningless. It is to say that truth must fight its way through the economics of visibility. Some truths are heavy and costly. They move slowly. Others are cheap and profitable. They spread like wildfire. And so, the balance of belief tilts, not toward reality, but toward what the market can bear, What does this mean for freedom? If belief itself is shaped by money, then freedom of thought is not entirely free. It is bounded, framed, and influenced. You may imagine yourself thinking independently, but your independence was always filtered by the structures that decided what information reached you. Pause once more. Let the silence fill the space as you breathe deeply. This is why the economics of belief is so powerful. It reaches beyond possessions, beyond time, beyond geography. It reaches into the deepest part of you, your mind, your worldview, your sense of truth. And it shapes it quietly, invisibly, until belief itself becomes a transaction. And so we arrive at the next unsettling truth. If money can shape belief, then surely it can bend memory too. The debt of the past. Debt isn't just financial, it's generational. When we hear the word debt, most of us think of bills in the mail, balances on credit cards, the weight of student loans or mortgages, pressing down on our present lives. We imagine debt as something individual, something we take on when we borrow, something we must pay back in installments that seem to stretch endlessly into the future. But debt is not confined to the personal ledger. It extends backward, weaving itself into history, binding the living to the choices of those who came before. It lingers, clings, and multiplies until we realize that what we are paying for is not only our own decisions, but the echoes of decisions made decades, even centuries ago. Pause for a moment. Take a breath. Reflect on how much of your life right now is shaped not by your choices, but by debts you inherited without asking for them. Consider the student loan. A young person chooses education with the hope of freedom, with the dream of expanding possibilities. Yet the moment they sign the agreement, they are binding their future self to the economic decisions of the past. They are paying not just for knowledge, but for the financial architecture of the society that decided education should be commodified, not provided. That decision made decades ago by policymakers, investors, and institutions now threads itself into the daily life of millions. Graduates begin adulthood not with freedom, but with the weight of repayment. Their choices, where to live, what job to take, whether to marry, whether to have children, are no longer free choices. They are filtered through the inherited burden of debt. Mortgages tell a similar story. For many, the dream of owning a home is one of stability and belonging. Yet that dream often stretches into 30-year obligations. Think of it, 30 years, nearly half a lifetime, promised to a bank, tethered to payments that must be met regardless of what life brings. Behind those mortgages lies the long history of real estate speculation, banking practices, and national housing policies. When you pay your monthly installment, you are not simply securing a roof over your head. You are participating in the economic systems built long before you were born, systems that made housing a product, a market, an investment, rather than a human right. The past lives in your present, demanding payment. Pause again. Let that thought linger. Breathe slowly. Now widen the lens. Consider national debts. Entire countries carry the weight of borrowing, often stretching across generations. A nation borrows to fund wars, to build infrastructure, to sustain economies during crisis. Decades later, citizens still carry the burden of repayment through taxes, reduced public services, or economic instability. You, sitting in your own time, are paying for the decisions of leaders long gone. The wars they waged, the budgets they miscalculated, the policies they enacted, these ripple into your present life as obligations you never chose. This is the haunting truth. Debt collapses time. It fuses past and present into a single thread. What was borrowed yesterday must be paid today. What was decided long ago echoes into the choices of those who had no voice in the decision. You are never just yourself. You are also the inheritor of debts, both financial and symbolic, that have been accumulating for generations. Think of colonial debts. Former colonies, after gaining independence, were often forced to assume the debts of their colonizers, paying for infrastructure that benefited others or for compensation owed to the very powers that exploited them. These debts trapped entire nations in cycles of repayment, shaping economies long after political independence was won. Today, the poverty of some regions is not a result of laziness or lack of innovation, but the residue of debts imposed decades ago. The past clings, insisting on payment. Or think of environmental debt. The industrial revolutions of the past 2 centuries were powered by coal, oil, and gas. These choices built wealth for some nations, created comfort and abundance, and accelerated progress. But the cost was deferred. The carbon released, the forests cut, the species erased, all of these accumulated as a kind of planetary debt. And now, generations later, the bill arrives. Rising seas, wildfires, shifting climates, these are the interest payments demanded by the choices of the past. You did not make those choices, but you live with their consequences. You are paying in heat and storm for the debts of time. Pause. Let the silence settle for a moment. Reflect on how even the air you breathe is shaped by the unpaid balances of history. This is the cruel paradox of debt. It is not only about what you owe. It is about what has already been decided, what has already been consumed, what has already been borrowed against your future. Debt is the past reaching forward with invisible hands, gripping your present tightly, refusing to let go. And yet, despite its weight, debt is often invisible. You feel its pressure, but rarely see its origins. You may believe your loan is only yours, but it is entangled with decades of policy, with economic systems designed to make borrowing necessary. You may think your nation's taxes are only numbers, but they carry the shadow of wars, crises, and bargains struck long before you were born. Even the price of food, the cost of medicine, the rent you pay, carries the residue of debts accumulated upstream. Belief in debt as a natural fact hides its constructed nature. This invisibility makes debt especially powerful. It feels inevitable, as though it were part of the natural order. And yet, debt is always created, always negotiated, always the result of choices made by people who are often no longer alive, but whose echoes still shape your days. In this way, debt erodes the boundary between self and history. You are not only yourself, you are the carrier of debts both visible and unseen. Pause here again. Breathe slowly. Let the thought rest in you like a quiet weight. But there is something else to notice about debt. It does not only bind the present to the past, it also shapes the future. To carry debt is to live in anticipation of repayment. It pulls tomorrow into today, forcing you to plan not only for your needs, but for obligations that must be met. It structures time itself. Your future is not an open horizon. It is already promised, already mortgaged, already claimed. Debt ensures that the past not only lingers, but also colonizes what has not yet arrived. This can feel suffocating. Imagine the young person starting out with decades of student loans, their future already parceled into monthly installments. Imagine the family with a 30-year mortgage, calculating not only their present budget, but their survival through decades yet to come. Imagine entire nations whose futures are constrained by the weight of interest payments, unable to invest freely in new possibilities because the past demands repayment. In all these cases, the past does not simply haunt, it actively writes the script for the future. And yet, debt is not always presented as a burden. Sometimes it is marketed as opportunity. Loans are described as investments, mortgages as pathways to ownership, national borrowing as stimulus. This language softens the reality. But beneath the polished words, the truth remains. Debt ensures that the past clings to the present and that freedom is always tethered. Pause one last time. Take a deep breath. Reflect on the debts you carry, not only financial, but historical, cultural, environmental. Feel how much of your life is not entirely yours, but shared with the weight of time. And as you sit with that, Consider the next question. If debt binds us to the past, what happens when money tries to bind the future as well? But as the past lingers, money also tries to secure its future grip. The future in chains. How much of your tomorrow has already been sold? It feels natural to imagine the future as a wide horizon open, unmarked, waiting for you to step into it. Each day you believe will unfold fresh, untouched by anyone else's claims. But when you pause and look more closely, you begin to see faint lines already sketched across that horizon. Your wages for years to come, your hours yet unlived, your choices not yet made, many of them have already been promised. They have been signed over in contracts, buried in obligations, pulled into the present to satisfy the demands of money. The unsettling truth is this: the future is not entirely free. It is already mortgaged before it even arrives. Pause for a moment. Breathe slowly. Imagine your future self, years from now, walking through the hours of a day, and notice how many of those hours are already tethered to payments, debts, and obligations created today. Credit cards are perhaps the simplest way this happens. A swipe, a tap, a purchase, and you are pulling money from the future into the present. You live tomorrow's earnings today, enjoying the satisfaction of immediacy while binding your future self to repayment. The moment feels free, effortless, but the cost lingers, waiting for you in statements and interest. In this way, the future becomes a kind of currency, constantly borrowed against, constantly diminished before it has even arrived. Loans extend this logic further. A car loan, a personal loan, a mortgage all are forms of selling your future. You promise not just your money, but your time, your labor, your existence yet to come. For years, sometimes decades, your future self will be working to repay the decisions of your present self. It is as if you are reaching forward in time, harvesting your own hours before they even grow, and handing them over to someone else. Pause here. Take a deep breath. Let the image rest in your mind, your future, already carved into installments, parceled into obligations. Retirement funds, too, pull the future into the present, though in a more disguised way. You are told to save, to invest, to prepare for a time when you will no longer work. But this preparation is not neutral. It is built on financial systems that rely on your participation, that grow by drawing your present earnings into vast pools of capital. You are promised security, but you are also locked into a long chain of dependence on markets, investments, and interest rates. Even your vision of rest is not free. It is monetized, traded, and subjected to the fluctuations of profit. This system extends beyond the individual. Nations borrow against their future constantly. Governments issue bonds, take loans, and commit to decades of repayment. The taxes of tomorrow's citizens are already spoken for. Entire generations inherit not only the culture and history of their nations, but also their unpaid bills. Wars, infrastructure, crises, all are financed by borrowing, and the repayment echoes into the lives of those who never made the decision to borrow in the first place. The future, in this sense, is already colonized. You may imagine it as open space, but in reality, it is filled with contracts, obligations, and claims waiting to be cashed. You live today not only with your own desires, but with the weight of tomorrows that are already spoken for. Pause once more. Let the thoughts settle like a quiet weight. This creates a paradox in our lives. On the one hand, the ability to borrow against the future gives us access to experiences we might otherwise never have. A home, an education, a moment of luxury, these are made possible by pulling tomorrow into today. Yet, on the other hand, each act of borrowing tightens the chain, narrowing the freedom of the future. You are both liberated and imprisoned at once. Consider the student who takes out loans for education. In that moment, they are buying not only knowledge, but a future bound by repayment. The hope is that the degree will create opportunities to outweigh the cost. But for many, the weight of debt stretches on, shaping every decision: what job to take, where to live, how to spend, when to rest. The future is already decided before it arrives. Or consider the family who buys a home. A mortgage may bring stability, shelter, belonging, but it also binds the next 30 years to a single obligation. Choices about career, movement, even dreams are filtered through the question, can I make the next payment? The home is not just a place, it is a contract with the future. This is the essence of money's control. It does not only dominate the present, it stretches forward, wrapping its hands around time that has not yet unfolded. Philosophers have long reflected on the nature of the future. Some see it as possibility, others as uncertainty. But rarely do we pause to see how much of it is already mortgaged by economics. The very hours you expect to live have been sold in advance, not only by you, but by institutions, governments, and societies that constantly borrow against what has not yet arrived. Pause again. Take a breath. Reflect on how much of your own future is already spoken for. And there is a cruel irony here. The poor, who already have little, are often forced to borrow more, binding their future selves even more tightly. Payday loans, high-interest credit, desperate borrowing all consume tomorrow before it can arrive. Meanwhile, the wealthy often buy freedom from this cycle. They lend instead of borrow, profiting from the chains that bind others. The future, unequal from the start, becomes a landscape of chained possibilities. This is not only about money. It is about imagination. When the future is already promised, our dreams shrink. We stop asking what we want to do with our lives and begin asking how we can pay for them. Choices are framed not by desire, but by obligation. The script of tomorrow is written not by possibility, but by contracts. And so, slowly, subtly, the horizon of life narrows. Pause. Let that thought stretch out. Breathe deeply. This realization is haunting. It forces us to ask, if the future is already mortgaged, do we ever truly live in the present? Or are we always borrowing against what has not yet happened, dragging the weight of tomorrow into today? Even joy becomes fragile when you know the cost is still waiting. Even rest feels temporary when the chain of obligation tugs at your wrist. And yet, we accept this. We normalize it. Borrowing is framed as empowerment. Debt is described as opportunity. To live beyond our means is seen as natural, even desirable. The chains are disguised as gifts. And in that disguise, we learn not only to endure them, but to embrace them. But the truth remains, the future is not untouched. It is already written in ledgers, already carved into repayments, already spoken for before you arrive. Pause once more. Let that awareness wash over you gently. If money can shape the past through debt and the present through wages, it shapes the future most of all by selling it in advance. And so, as you drift deeper into reflection, ask yourself quietly, how much of your tomorrow is already gone? And while your future is borrowed, even your emotions are for sale. The economy of emotion. Money doesn't just control things, it controls feelings. At first, that may sound strange. We think of emotions as private, deeply human, untouched by economics. Love, joy, grief, longing, these seem like sacred realms of the heart, outside the marketplace. But look closer, and you will begin to see how thoroughly money has entangled itself in the fabric of feeling. Gifts, luxuries, indulgences, even the smallest acts of care, are often mediated through purchases. We learn over time to measure our emotions in currency. We give with money, we celebrate with money, we even mourn with money. Slowly, subtly, money becomes the translator between the inner life and the outer world. Pause for a moment. Take a deep breath. Reflect on the last time you felt joy from something you bought. A new shirt, a favorite meal, a small item arriving in the mail. That rush of satisfaction, was it joy itself? Or was it joy filtered through the act of spending? Consider the tradition of gift-giving. Across cultures, We exchange presents to express love, gratitude, friendship, apology. The gesture is meant to embody feeling, yet the gift is almost always a purchased object. Its value, consciously or not, is measured in price. We learn to associate care with spending, to equate love with the cost of what is given. A small token may feel inadequate, while an expensive item seems more meaningful. The emotional weight of the gift becomes inseparable from the currency used to obtain it. Love itself becomes commodified, parceled into receipts. This entanglement deepens with luxury. Entire industries thrive by convincing us that joy, status, and self-worth can be purchased. A luxury handbag is not just leather and stitching. It is the promise of admiration, the spark of pride, the illusion of being more complete. An expensive car is not merely transport. It is power, identity, emotion wrapped in steel. These purchases whisper that happiness is not simply within you, but in the marketplace, waiting to be bought. And the more we believe this, the more we measure our feelings against the backdrop of what we can or cannot afford. Pause again. Let that idea linger. Imagine how many of your emotions are tied to the act of buying. How many moments of joy are framed not by experience alone, but by transaction. Even small indulgences work this way. The morning coffee, the late night snack, the impulse purchase online. They provide a burst of comfort, a momentary lifting of mood. We learn to soothe ourselves through spending, to heal anxieties with shopping, to chase happiness in the marketplace. The phrase retail therapy is lighthearted, yet it reveals a profound truth. Emotion itself has become an economy. We trade money for feelings, again and again, until it feels natural, inevitable. But what does this mean for us? What happens when joy, love, even self-worth are tied to money? The implications are unsettling. It means that emotions are no longer free. They can be rented, purchased, packaged, but rarely owned. A child may feel joy opening a toy, but that joy is bound to the ability of their parents to afford it. A couple may celebrate their love with an extravagant dinner, but that memory is built upon money spent. Even self-esteem is often anchored to economic displays. The right clothes, the right phone, the right house. Without them, feelings of worthiness are harder to sustain. Pause. Take a slow breath. Reflect on how deeply money is woven into the texture of your feelings. Think of holidays. Many of them, once rooted in spiritual or communal rituals, have been reshaped into commercial spectacles. Joy is measured in decorations purchased, in gifts exchanged, in meals prepared at great expense. To feel part of the celebration, one must spend. Those who cannot afford it often feel excluded, left outside not just materially but emotionally. Money becomes the ticket to belonging. Or think of grief. Even mourning has been commodified. Funerals, coffins, ceremonies, all are industries. And the depth of loss is often marked by the scale of spending. Families, in their most vulnerable moments, are presented with choices framed by cost. Which casket, which flowers, which rituals. Grief is universal, but its expression is filtered through the economics of what one can afford. In this way, money infiltrates even the most sacred emotions, shaping how they are experienced, remembered, and displayed. Historically, this is not new. Ancient civilizations tied emotions to offerings and sacrifices. To show devotion, one gave costly gifts to gods or temples. To prove loyalty, one paid tribute. Emotion and money have long been entwined. What has changed is scale. Today, the reach of markets is vast, global, instantaneous. Advertisements do not simply sell objects, they sell emotions. Commercials for perfume do not describe the scent, they depict love, attraction, desire. Ads for vacations do not describe beaches, they show joy, laughter, family unity. The product is secondary. The emotion is what is really being bought. Pause again. Let this realization settle in. There is also a darker side. If money controls emotion, then emotion can be manipulated. Consider the role of marketing in creating artificial needs. A company tells you that happiness comes from owning their product. They show smiling faces, laughter, belonging, all tied to the act of purchase. Slowly, you begin to associate those feelings with spending. Desire itself becomes manufactured, and the emotions tied to it are sold back to you at a profit. Joy is no longer spontaneous, it is engineered. This raises unsettling questions. If joy can be bought, is it real? If love is expressed through price tags, is it genuine? If self-worth depends on brands, is it truly yours? The economy of emotion blurs these boundaries, leaving us to wonder how much of what we feel is authentic and how much has been scripted by money. Pause, breathe deeply, reflect gently. The consequences reach beyond individuals. Entire societies are shaped by this emotional economy. Cultures of consumerism teach people to measure happiness by GDP, to equate prosperity with well-being. Nations celebrate growth in spending as if it were growth in joy. The marketplace becomes not only an economic system, but an emotional one, defining what feelings are valid, which emotions are rewarded, which desires are cultivated. And yet, despite its reach, there is resistance. People find joy in things money cannot touch. The warmth of sunlight, the sound of a loved one's voice, the quiet of nature, the laughter of friends. These moments remind us that emotions need not always be bought, but even here, money lurks. Access to nature may require travel. Time for loved ones may require economic freedom. Even the free joys of life are often conditioned by the structures money builds around them. Pause once more. Take a slow breath. Let this paradox rest within you. This is the haunting truth. Joy, love, and self-worth can all be packaged and sold, rented and displayed, but rarely owned outright. Emotions, which should be infinite and personal, become commodities. And the more we allow money to define them, the more fragile they become. So ask yourself quietly, how much of what you feel is truly yours? How much of your joy, your love, your worth has been shaped by the marketplace? And can you imagine emotions that are free from price? Take another deep breath. Allow the thought to fade slowly into silence. If feelings are traded, then surely identity itself is the next currency. The currency of identity. Who you are is often expressed through what you can afford. It may feel uncomfortable to hear it put so plainly, but pause for a moment and consider how much of your identity, your sense of self, your outward image, the way others recognize you, is wrapped in economic signals. Fashion, hobbies, careers, even the neighborhoods you inhabit, these are stitched together by transactions, purchases, and price tags. We like to think of identity as something innate, authentic, an essence that belongs only to us. But in truth, identity is one of money's most subtle and powerful currencies. Take a deep breath. Let that thought sit in the quiet of your mind. Imagine yourself stripped of every object, every brand, every purchased layer of expression. What remains? From the moment we are born, identity begins to be shaped by economics. The clothes wrapped around a newborn, the toys placed in their hands, the books read to them at night, all are filtered by the economic circumstances of their parents. A child raised in wealth will absorb signals of abundance, certain foods, certain schools, certain vacations. A child raised in poverty will absorb different signals, shaped by scarcity, by limitation, by what is affordable. These economic conditions do not only affect opportunity, they seep into identity. Who you become is sculpted not only by your choices, but by the resources that shaped your earliest years. As we grow, this entanglement deepens. Fashion is perhaps the clearest example. The way we dress is not simply a matter of personal taste. It is a language, and like all languages, it is full of codes. Certain brands signal wealth, others signal rebellion, others practicality, modesty, or tradition. The clothes you wear send messages to the world about who you are, but those messages are rarely free. They are purchased. The fabric of your identity is literally woven through economic decisions, both yours and others. Pause. Imagine the contents of your wardrobe. Ask yourself, how much of what you wear was chosen for comfort, and how much for the identity it projects? The same applies to hobbies. Consider music, sports, art, travel. These activities shape how we see ourselves and how others see us, yet access to them is profoundly unequal. A person who sails on weekends signals one kind of identity, while a person who spends evenings playing video games signals another. Neither identity is inherently better or worse, but each is formed by the availability of money. To cultivate a hobby, to immerse yourself in passion, often requires investment. Even the very idea of a lifestyle is inseparable from economics. Careers, too, are stitched into this fabric. When you meet someone new, one of the first questions asked is, "What do you do?" The answer is not only about labor, it is about identity. A doctor, an artist, a lawyer, a teacher, these titles carry different weights, different assumptions, different forms of respect. Yet behind each identity lies a trail of financial structures. The cost of education, the availability of jobs, the salaries attached to professions. Identity is not only what you choose, it is also what you can afford to choose. Pause again. Reflect on how much of your self-image is connected to your economic path. The haunting part of all this is that identity feels deeply personal. It feels like the truest thing about you. And in some ways, it is. But when you peel back the layers, you see that money is everywhere in its construction. The music you love may be shaped by what was available to you. The books you cherish by what you could buy or borrow. The food that feels like home by what your family could afford. Even your tastes, which feel natural and authentic, are shaped by exposure, and exposure is always tied to economics. This realization does not diminish the authenticity of identity. It does not make you less real, but it reveals how much of you has been assembled through transactions you barely noticed. You are stitched together by purchases, by opportunities shaped by money, by signals broadcast in currencies that go deeper than you imagined. Pause. Let this truth drift through your thoughts like a slow tide. Consider, too, how society reinforces this. We live in cultures of display. Social media amplifies the economic dimension of identity. Posts of travel, meals, fashion, possessions all become markers of who we are. To signal belonging, to signal taste, to signal success, we curate economic signs. A vacation is not only rest, it is identity displayed. A concert ticket is not only an experience, it is a badge of belonging. The line between life and advertisement blurs until we are all, in some way, selling our identities in the marketplace of attention. Historically, this has always been true in some form. In medieval Europe, clothing laws dictated what colors and fabrics different classes could wear. In ancient Rome, togas marked social status. In the 18th century, powdered wigs and ornate gowns displayed wealth and rank. Identity has long been broadcast through material signals. What has changed is the scale and speed. Today, identity is not only performed in the streets, but broadcast to the entire world instantly through digital platforms. And behind every performance lies money. Pause. Take another slow breath. Reflect on the quiet ways you perform your identity every day. This commodification of identity carries profound implications. If who you are is tied to what you can afford, then those with less money are not only deprived of goods, they are deprived of recognition, of belonging, of dignity. Their identities are marked by exclusion, by the absence of signals society has deemed valuable. Conversely, those with more wealth are often afforded identities of prestige, authority, and desirability, regardless of their personal qualities. Identity becomes not only an inner truth, but a market privilege. This can fracture the self. Inside, you may feel one thing, but society sees another, filtered through the economic signals you can or cannot send. A brilliant mind may go unrecognized because it is housed in the wrong clothes, the wrong neighborhood, the wrong job. A shallow personality may be elevated because it can afford the right displays. Identity, in this sense, is not always honest. It is a currency traded, a signal exchanged, a performance shaped by economic power. And yet, there is a paradox here. While money shapes identity, identity also sells. Industries profit from our need to express ourselves. Fashion thrives not only because of utility, but because people crave identity through clothing. Tech companies sell phones not only as tools, but as extensions of personality. Cars are marketed not only as machines, but as reflections of who we are. Our hunger for identity becomes a market opportunity, and so we are constantly invited, even pressured, to purchase ourselves anew. Pause again. Let the thought settle. This cycle is exhausting. We are told that to be authentic, to be unique, we must buy, signal, perform. And yet, the more we purchase our identities, the more alike we become. The signals are mass-produced. The authenticity is branded. The individuality is scripted. In chasing identity through the marketplace, we risk losing the very individuality we seek. But what would identity look like without money? Can you imagine yourself stripped of every purchase, every display, every branded signal? Who would you be if identity were not tied to economic expression? This is a difficult question, perhaps impossible to answer, because even the act of imagining is shaped by what you know, and what you know has been filtered through money. Pause. Breathe deeply. Reflect on the layers of yourself that might remain if all the economic signals fell away. This is the haunting truth of the currency of identity. You are stitched together by transactions you didn't notice, sewn into a fabric of economic signals that shape how you see yourself and how others see you. And while this may feel unsettling, it can also be clarifying. To recognize it is to see the threads for what they are. Awareness gives you the power to ask, which parts of my identity feel authentic, and which parts have been sold to me? Take a moment now. Sit with the silence. Let the thought expand gently in your mind. And if identity is bought and sold, so too is silence itself. The cost of silence. What we don't talk about often reveals money's grip. It is easy to focus on the noise of the world, the chatter of headlines, the constant hum of advertisements, the endless chorus of opinions flooding through screens and speakers. We notice what is loud, what is amplified, what repeats itself until it seems like truth. But just as telling, perhaps even more telling, is what remains unspoken. Silence, the absence of words, the gaps in the story, these are often shaped not by accident, but by money. Companies pay for silence. Governments suppress truths that threaten economies. Individuals trade their voices for contracts, settlements, or fear. What you hear and what you never hear are both filtered through economic power. Silence itself has become a commodity. Pause for a moment. Breathe slowly. Let your thoughts drift not to the words you've heard today, but to the spaces where words never came. What truths lie there, unseen, unspoken? Consider the practice of non-disclosure agreements, those legal instruments that bind people to silence. A worker leaves a company under tense circumstances. A settlement is offered, payment is exchanged, and in return, silence is demanded. The story disappears from public view. The wrongdoing, the abuse, the corruption, whatever it may have been, no longer exists in the shared conversation. It has been purchased, hidden beneath the weight of money. The silence is not empty. It is bought. This pattern scales upward into societies. Governments, fearing economic collapse, may silence truths about failing banks, environmental disasters, or political scandals. Officials delay announcements, obscure statistics, or present carefully crafted half-truths, all to protect markets from panic. The silence is strategic. It is designed to preserve confidence, to prevent the flow of money from faltering. Citizens live within this curated quiet, not realizing that what they don't hear is as significant as what they do. Pause again. Let that thought linger. Imagine the truths that lie buried beneath carefully managed silence. History offers countless examples. In the early days of tobacco advertising, companies knew the health risks of smoking. Studies revealed links to cancer. Yet for decades, silence was purchased. Scientists were pressured, evidence suppressed, campaigns launched to cast doubt. The truth was buried under money, while millions suffered. The silence was not natural, it was manufactured. It was an investment, yielding profits at the cost of lives. Or consider oil companies and climate change. For decades, internal research revealed the dangers of carbon emissions. And yet, public silence dominated. Money flowed into lobbying, into misinformation campaigns, into casting uncertainty where there was none. The silence bought time, and with that time came profit. Only later did the truth begin to seep through, and even now, much of the silence remains. This reveals something unsettling. Silence is not passive. It is active. It is sculpted, managed, traded. The absence of words is often the most expensive purchase of all. Pause. Take a deep breath. Reflect on how many silences surround your own life, in your workplace, your community, your country. Silence operates not only through suppression, but through fear. Workers who fear losing their jobs may stay quiet about injustice. Citizens who fear punishment may remain silent about corruption. Even families, bound by cultural or financial dependence, may keep quiet about truths too costly to reveal. Fear, too, is a currency, and money often provides the weight behind it. Those who have power can afford to buy silence. Those without power often cannot afford to break it. There is also the silence of distraction. Money funds noise not only to speak, but to drown out. Entertainment, marketing, trivial headlines, all can serve to obscure deeper truths. A flood of sound becomes a veil, making silence less noticeable. The questions that matter most are hidden beneath the constant hum of things that matter least. In this way, money doesn't only purchase silence, it conceals it. Pause once more. Let your mind drift over this paradox. Silence can be loud, but perhaps the most haunting silence is the silence of history. Whole voices, entire peoples, have been erased by economic power. Enslaved people, colonized nations, marginalized communities, so often their stories were silenced, not recorded, not preserved, because they did not serve the interests of those in power. What we call history is itself curated by money, whose voices were written, whose stories were published, whose monuments were built. What you read in textbooks is not the totality of truth. It is the record of voices that wealth allowed to endure. The silence of the forgotten is another kind of debt, one humanity still carries. Pause. Breathe deeply. Reflect on the silences of your own ancestry, your own community, the gaps that money left behind. This realization reshapes how we think of knowledge. We are taught to trust what we can verify, what is documented, what is said. But what about the truths that money has kept unsaid? What about the evidence that was destroyed, the testimonies that were silenced, the research that was never funded? Knowledge is not only what survives, it is also what is missing. And the missing is often missing because silence was purchased. This makes silence one of money's most insidious tools. It governs not only what you hear, but also what you don't. It shapes belief not only by the stories it tells, but by the stories it prevents. And because silence leaves no trace, it is almost impossible to question. You cannot notice what is absent unless you know it should be there. Pause again. Let the quiet itself teach you something. The silence between my words, what does it conceal? What truths might live there? The implications are vast. If silence can be purchased, then truth itself is vulnerable. Justice becomes negotiable. Memory becomes selective. Reality itself bends under the weight of money. And perhaps the most unsettling part is that we, too, participate in this. When we remain silent about injustice in our own lives because it feels safer, when we accept the curated quiet of society because noise would be uncomfortable, we too allow silence to be bought. Yet, within this realization lies a strange clarity. To notice silence is to reclaim a fragment of power. To ask, what is missing here? Who benefits from this quiet? Whose voice has been excluded? These questions pierce the veil of purchased silence. They invite awareness, even if they cannot always break the silence entirely. Pause. Let this awareness settle gently. Money, then, is not only a force of noise, but a force of quiet. It does not only shout through advertisements and headlines. It whispers through omissions, through settlements, through unspoken truths. And in doing so, it shapes reality not by what is said, but by what is never said at all. Take one more breath. Imagine silence not as emptiness, but as territory mapped, bought, sold, controlled. What we don't talk about is as revealing as what we do. But silence hides a larger paradox, that even nothing has a price. The market of nothing. How do you buy something that doesn't exist? The question seems absurd at first. How could a market thrive on what is not real? How could value be assigned to what cannot be touched, tasted, or even seen? Yet pause for a moment and look around at the modern economy, and you will realize that much of what is bought and sold today is not tangible at all. Entire fortunes rise and collapse on trades of nothing. Stock derivatives, carbon credits, digital currencies markets pulse with abstractions, with contracts written on air, with symbols and promises instead of physical goods. And still they yield profit. Still they create power. Still they decide the fates of nations and individuals alike. Take a deep breath. Reflect quietly on this truth. Money itself has always been, in some sense, nothing. When you hold a bill in your hand, it is just paper. The numbers in your bank account are just symbols on a screen. What gives them meaning is not the paper or the pixels, but the collective belief that they matter. Currency, in its most basic form, is an agreement, a story told by society. Its value exists only because we all agree to treat it as real. The economy has always floated above reality, held up not by objects, but by belief. And yet, in the modern age, this detachment has grown even more extreme. We no longer trade simply in money as a proxy for goods. We trade in layers of abstraction, stacked upon one another, markets of symbols orbiting further and further from material reality. Consider derivatives. At their core, derivatives are contracts about contracts, bets on the future value of assets, arrangements that often never touch the underlying thing they represent. Traders exchange paper, promises, and speculation, profiting not from the object itself, but from the shifting shadows cast by its imagined value. Billions can be gained or lost in markets where nothing physical ever moves. The profits are real. The losses are devastating. But the thing itself, the commodity, is absent. It is nothing, packaged, monetized, and sold. Pause for a moment. Breathe deeply. Imagine billions of dollars moving across the globe, changing hands in milliseconds, all for transactions where nothing tangible has happened at all. Carbon credits tell a similar story. Companies trade permits to pollute, promising to offset emissions or buy the right to continue them. On paper, the numbers shift, the credits circulate, the markets hum with activity. Yet what is being traded is not a product, but the absence of one, the avoidance of carbon, the reduction of harm, the promise of restraint. Nothing moves. Nothing is delivered. And yet money flows. Entire markets thrive on transactions of nothing. Or think of digital currencies. Bitcoin, Ethereum, countless others, What are they but strings of code, intangible tokens, existing only in digital ledgers? They are not coins, not bills, not physical stores of value. And yet, they are mined, hoarded, traded, worshipped. Fortunes rise and vanish in their volatile swings. People devote entire lives to chasing or securing them. The market of nothing becomes a world unto itself, as real an impact as any market of steel, grain, or oil. Pause. Let this thought settle gently. Economies no longer need things to prosper. They need only belief. Even art has entered this abstraction. Non-fungible tokens, digital certificates of ownership for images that anyone can freely view, have been bought for millions. What is being purchased? Not the image itself. It is freely replicable, but the illusion of uniqueness, the contract of ownership. The buyer holds nothing tangible, nothing exclusive, and yet the transaction holds immense economic weight. This is the paradox. The economy thrives not on reality, but on imagination. Even nothing can be monetized. And perhaps this has always been the case. Consider medieval indulgences payments to the church for forgiveness of sins. What was bought was not a thing, but an idea, a release from spiritual debt, an invisible promise. The faithful gave money in exchange for nothing tangible, but the transaction was powerful, binding, real. Humanity has always been willing to pay for nothing, as long as the nothing was wrapped in meaning. Pause again. Take a breath. Reflect on the quiet eeriness of this truth. The implications are vast. If nothing can be sold, then value itself is untethered from material life. The economy does not need to produce goods to grow. It only needs to produce symbols, contracts, abstractions. Reality becomes secondary. What matters is what can be imagined, packaged, and traded. This explains the volatility of modern finance, the way markets can rise or collapse based on speculation, fear, or rumor. The economy is no longer anchored to the ground, it floats on air. And yet, this floating economy governs our lives. Jobs are lost when markets of nothing collapse. Governments tremble when speculation runs wild. Families suffer when abstract numbers dip or spike. Even though what is traded is nothing, the consequences are very real. The market of nothing is not harmless illusion. It is power in its purest, most intangible form. Pause once more. Let your breath slow. Feel the weight of nothingness pressing against the shape of your thoughts. There is something haunting about this. If nothing can be sold, then what is left untouched? If everything, even absence, can be commodified, then perhaps nothing is safe from the reach of money. Silence is bought, desire is manufactured, time is sold, belief is filtered, and now even nothing becomes a product. Where, then, is the boundary? Philosophers have long wrestled with the nature of nothing. Some call it emptiness, others possibility, others illusion. In economics, nothing is not empty. It is fertile ground. It is a canvas upon which profit can be painted. And so we learn to live in a world where the most powerful markets are those with the least substance. Take another breath. Reflect on this quietly. We live in a world where absence itself has value. And if nothing can be sold, then what, truly, is left of you that is untouched? The ownership of the self. We believe, at the very least, that we own ourselves. The body we wake up in, the mind that thinks our thoughts, the breath that moves through our lungs, these seem to be the most intimate forms of ownership possible. Even if everything else is bought and sold, we want to believe there is a boundary at the edge of the self. This is mine, we say. I belong to me. It feels like the last refuge of freedom, the final truth untouched by the marketplace. But pause for a moment. Breathe deeply. And then ask yourself, do you really own yourself? Or is even that too entangled in the quiet grip of money? From the very beginning, your body is marked by economics. Birth itself is costly in many places, and the first breath of life already comes with a bill attached. Hospitals, doctors, medications, all of them exist within economic systems. Your entry into the world is not free. You arrive already entangled in transactions. And as you grow, that entanglement deepens. Vaccines, checkups, education, all mediated by money. Even the most basic conditions of survival, food, shelter, warmth, are rarely yours by right. They are yours by purchase, by wage, by exchange. You belong to yourself only insofar as you can afford to sustain yourself. Pause here. Let the thought linger. You cannot own yourself without constantly renting the conditions of your existence. As you age, your body becomes a site of regulation and transaction. Health care is priced, and access to it often determines whether you live or die. Medicines, surgeries, therapies all carry costs, and those costs can restrict your very right to survive. To be poor is not simply to lack comfort. It is to live in a body whose ownership is compromised. If you cannot pay for health, you do not fully own yourself. And then there is labor. When you work, you sell not only your time, but your body and mind. Your energy, your creativity, your strength, these become commodities in the marketplace. You sign contracts that regulate what you may and may not do with your own body during certain hours. You must sit here, type there, stand here, lift there. Even your posture, your tone of voice, your expressions may be dictated by the conditions of your labor. For those hours, do you truly own yourself? Or are you leased to an employer, your autonomy temporarily suspended by money? Pause, breathe slowly. Reflect on how much of yourself is rented out each day. Even your mind is not free. Education, books, knowledge, all of these are filtered through economic systems. Universities charge tuition. Publishers charge fees. Platforms monetize content. Your ability to think, to shape your inner world, is tethered to money. And beyond education, there is the marketplace of influence, advertising, media, entertainment. Your thoughts are constantly nudged, shaped, manipulated by industries that profit from your attention. In this way, ownership of your mind is contested. How much of what you think is truly yours, and how much is the echo of money whispering through culture? Even freedom itself is conditional. To move freely often requires money for transportation, for visas, for documents. To live without interference often requires payment for housing, for land, for legal protection. Freedom is not given, it is purchased, maintained, defended by economic means. And when you cannot afford it, freedom shrinks. You may still breathe, still walk, still dream, but within narrower and narrower boundaries. The very notion of self-ownership becomes fragile, eroded by the quiet demands of money. Pause again. Imagine your body as a house and money as the landlord. You may live in it, but you are constantly paying rent. Historically, this has been made explicit. Slavery is the most extreme example. Entire human beings owned, bought, and sold as property. Their bodies were not their own. Their labor, their movement, their lives commodities in markets of cruelty. And though formal slavery has been abolished in many places, echoes remain. Systems of exploitation, forced labor, trafficking, and debt bondage continue to reduce human beings to property. Even today, many people do not own themselves in any meaningful sense. Their existence is leased to survival, controlled by those with economic power. But even in freer societies, subtler forms persist. Consider prisons where inmates' labor is monetized, their bodies used as commodities within systems of profit. Consider migrant workers whose passports are confiscated, binding them to employers. Consider gig workers whose freedom is celebrated even as their bodies are exhausted by endless labor. In all these cases, the body, the self, is entangled in money's grip. Pause. Let the quiet of this truth unfold within you. Even in the realm of the personal, ownership of the self is compromised. Beauty industries thrive on the commodification of the body. You are told that to be desirable, to be valuable, you must purchase treatments, clothing, enhancements. Identity itself is sold back to you through products. Your body is not simply yours. It is a marketplace canvas painted by money's brush, and the mind, too, is monetized. Social media platforms turn your thoughts, your emotions, your attention into commodities. Your very being becomes a product, generating profit for others. The haunting part is that all of this feels normal. We accept that healthcare costs money, that labor sells our time, that freedom requires payment. We accept that our bodies are shaped by industries, that our minds are influenced by advertising. We cling to the idea of self-ownership because it feels like the last illusion of freedom. Yet when you examine it closely, the illusion begins to crumble. So what remains? If money controls your body, your time, your mind, your freedom, then who or what are you? Perhaps the last illusion falls here. Money doesn't just control what you do. It quietly defines who you are. You are not only an individual making choices. You are an economic entity, stitched into systems of profit, shaped by transactions, your identity, your freedom, your very survival filtered through money's hands. Pause again. Take a slow, deep breath. Reflect on how much of you is truly yours. And yet, within this unsettling realization, there is also a strange clarity. To see the illusion is to step outside it, even if only briefly. To recognize that ownership of the self is conditional, fragile, entangled in money, is to begin reclaiming small pieces of awareness. You may not escape the system, but you can notice it. You can pause and ask, is this choice truly mine? Is this thought truly mine? Is this body truly free? Even the act of questioning is a form of quiet resistance, a whisper of authenticity in a world of transactions. Pause once more. Let the silence gather around you. And so, as you drift into sleep, reflect on this. How much of you is truly yours? And how much has been rented by money all along? We have wandered through many rooms tonight. 12 hidden ways that money shapes your choices, your desires, your time, your very sense of self. And perhaps, as you listened, you felt a quiet realization stirring, that your life, as ordinary as it may seem, is threaded with invisible strings. That money's grip reaches not only into your wallet, but into your mind, your dreams, and your future. But with this realization comes a kind of peace. Because once you see the patterns, once you know the illusions, they no longer hold the same power. You are still part of the system, yes, but you are awake to it. And awareness is its own form of freedom. So now, let the weight of these thoughts soften. Let them fade into the background of your mind like echoes drifting into silence. You don't need to solve it tonight. You don't need to carry it any further. For now, all you need to do is rest. Close your eyes. Breathe deeply. Let your body grow heavy against the bed. You are safe here. The world can wait until morning. Good night. Sleep well. May your dreams be sweet, and may your rest be deep. Sleep tight, you've earned it.